So when you look at a map of Canada, I mean, it is almost impossible not to be struck by the sheer amount of blue.
Oh, yeah. It is literally everywhere.
Right. Millions of lakes, these massive meandering rivers. It's basically a giant continental sponge.
It really is.
And, looking at it, it feels incredibly secure, like the country just won the geographic lottery.
Mm-hmm.
But when you step out of that zoomed out macroscopic view and you start looking at the actual health of those specific waterways, well, that infinite blue map starts to look incredibly fragile.
Yeah, it does. It's the absolute definition of a hidden vulnerability, really.
Exactly.
Like it's a crisis masked by abundance.
And that is exactly why today's deep dive is going to take you right across that very map.
Yeah.
We are unpacking a pretty comprehensive report from WWF Canada, and it's titled Canada's Rivers at Risk.
Right.
Our mission today is to uncover this hidden crisis in what is widely considered one of the most water-wealthy nations on Earth.
Yeah, and to do that, we really need to introduce a paradigm shift straight from the source material. We basically have to stop thinking about fresh water in terms of sheer volume and start thinking about it in terms of flow.
Flow. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. To really visualize what that means, let's just change our backdrop here for a second.
Sure.
Imagine a sprawling, animated topographic map of Canada's watersheds just appearing right behind us.
Oh, that's a cool visual.
Right.
Yeah.
So the rigid borders between provinces, they just fade away entirely. And instead, you just see these pulsing, branching networks of water.
Just the veins of the country.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, we are exploring how flow regulation, massive consumptive water withdrawals, and of course, the overarching shadow of climate change are threatening 10 critically important Canadian rivers.
And naturally, what we can actually do to avert a national water crisis.
Yes.
Okay, let's unpack this core concept first, because we basically have to completely redefine how we measure a river's health, right?
We do.
We're moving from a static view, just looking at the sheer volume of water sitting in a basin, to a dynamic one, which is the flow.
Right, the movement.
I look at it this way. If a lake is essentially a static savings account, a river's flow is the cash flow of an ecosystem.
Oh, I like that.
Thanks. Because, focusing only on how much water Canada has in total is like looking at a company's total assets while ignoring that their daily cash flow is completely frozen.
Right, which is a massive problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A business cannot survive without cash flow, and, well, an ecosystem cannot survive without water flow.
That financial analogy actually translates perfectly to the biological metaphor that the report uses.
Oh, really? What do they use?
They describe a river's natural pattern of high and low flows as being exactly like blood pressure in the human body.
Oh, wow. Blood pressure.
Yeah. It is a vital, dynamic indicator of overall health. I mean, you can have plenty of blood in your system, but if your blood pressure is flatlining or, wildly spiking, you are in critical danger.
Okay, that makes total sense. Which means we can't just ask, how much water is there? We have to ask how the water is actually behaving.
Exactly. And scientists actually have the specific term for this. They call it environmental flows.
Environmental flows.
Yeah. It's a way of measuring not just the quantity of water, but the timing and the quality required to sustain these freshwater and estuarine ecosystems.
Doug.
Because historically, water management has been entirely anthropocentric. We always just asked, how much water can humans use?
Right. What can we take?
Exactly. But the science of environmental flows flips that completely. It forces us to look from the ecosystem outward.
Interesting.
We must answer the question of how much water we can use by first asking how much water the river can give.
So if we're measuring health by flow, that means a river flooding its banks in the spring or receding and drying up a bit in the summer isn't some disaster we need to tame.
Not at all.
It's actually the ecosystem functioning exactly as it should.
Yes, that variability is the heartbeat. Those massive spring high flows, they flush out accumulated sediment, and they actually trigger fish to migrate and spawn.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And then the summer low flows expose the riverbanks, which allows crucial vegetation to grow.
So it needs that cycle.
Absolutely. Every single river has its own unique natural flow regime dictated by the local climate, the geology, the soil.
Right.
And when human engineering alters that rhythm, well, the entire system goes into shock.
Which brings us to the first major threat on our map. Since flow is the lifeblood of a river, the first thing we have to examine is the infrastructure that artificially chokes or redirects that flow.
Yes, the physical barriers.
Right. We're talking about taming the waters with dams, diversions, and fragmentation. Let's look at the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah.
The report lists its status as poor, and its forecast is declining.
Yeah, the St. Lawrence is a really fascinating case because it forms this massive route inland from the Atlantic Ocean, basically draining the entire Great Lakes system.
It's huge.
It is, but it has been heavily engineered to generate hydropower and dredged for the St. Lawrence Seaway, making it one of the busiest shipping corridors in the world.
But, I mean, ships need stable, predictable water levels to safely navigate, right? They can't deal with wild floods and droughts.
Exactly. And providing that stability comes with a staggering ecological cost.
How bad is it?
Well, take the Moses Saunders Dam near Cornwall, Ontario. By artificially controlling the water levels to guarantee those shipping depths and, steady power generation, that dam has reduced the natural variability in the river's water levels by a massive 70%.
Wait, 70%. So they essentially flatlined the river's blood pressure just to keep the cargo ships moving.
They did, and the mechanism of destruction here is incredibly specific.
Tell me more.
Because the water level is artificially stabilized, the river no longer experiences those seasonal highs and lows we talked about.
Right, the heartbeat.
Right. So coastal wetland plants like meadow marsh and emergent floating vegetation, they require periods of low water to expose the mudflats.
So the seeds can get some sun.
Exactly. So their seeds can germinate in the sun, then they need the water to rise again to actually grow. By flatlining the flow, we've seen a 50% loss of that vegetation since the 1950s.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah, the seeds either drown or they never get wet. And the wetland bird species that rely on those marshes, they just vanish.
That's crazy. Just by stabilizing the water, we erase half the marshland.
It's a huge impact.
But there's a flip side to that coin, right? What happens when a dam makes a river's flow completely erratic?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other issue.
Because that is the nightmare scenario playing out east on the St. John River, which also has a poor and declining status in the report.
Yes, the St. John.
The Malsey people know this as Woolastock, the beautiful river. But what human infrastructure has done to it is, honestly, anything but beautiful for the wildlife.
No, it's pretty brutal. The St. John has 3 major hydroelectric dams on its main stem. And the issue here isn't stabilization, it is an industry practice called hydropeaking.
Okay, break that down for me. What is hydropeaking doing to the water?
So power grids face fluctuating demand, right? Everyone comes home at 5 p.m., turns on their ovens, their heaters, and demand spikes.
Sure.
To meet that peak, the dam operators open the gates, basically releasing a massive artificial wall of water through the turbines.
Okay.
Then at 2 a.m., when everyone is asleep and demand drops, they just shut the gates to hold the water back for the next day.
So they were essentially treating a wild river like a faucet.
Yes, exactly like a faucet.
And the statistics in the report on this absolutely floored me. Downstream of these dams, the flow can change by up to 91% in a single 24-hour period.
It's violent.
It really is. You have this massive rushing river at dinner time, and then the next morning the riverbed is just dewatered. It dries out, leaving young fish completely stranded in shallow puddles to die.
Yeah, it's devastating for them.
And because of this artificial chaos, only 2.7% of the historic Atlantic salmon numbers returned to the Mactaquac Dam in 2002.
Just heartbreaking.
We've taken a thriving species and decimated it just by flipping a switch on the river's flow.
It perfectly highlights how critical the timing of flow is. It's not just about letting a certain volume of water through over a year. It's about when and how fast that water arrives.
Right.
Now, consider the Nipigon River in Ontario. Its status is currently fair with an improving forecast, which we'll actually get to a bit later.
Okay, good to have some positive news coming.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But historically, it was heavily harnessed. Of its original 95-meter vertical drop, only 3 meters remain unharnessed by dams.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the engineering here borders on science fiction.
It does.
The Nipigon is the site of the Ogoki Diversion. So we are taking water that naturally flows north into the Arctic watershed toward James Bay, and we are artificially diverting it south into the Nipigon system.
A massive undertaking.
Right, and the reason? To generate more water volume for power generation at Niagara Falls, which is over 1,000 kilometers away.
It's hard to wrap your head around the scale.
It is. And by forcing all this extra water south, we increased the average flows in the Nipigon by 50%, causing massive riverbank erosion and landslides. I mean, are we basically playing SimCity with continental plumbing here?
We kind of are. What's fascinating here is that it is a phenomenal feat of engineering, sure, but ecologically, it perfectly illustrates the danger of what we call interbasin diversion.
Interbasin diversions.
Yeah. When you physically move water from one distinct watershed into another, you fundamentally destabilize ancient adapted ecosystems.
How so?
Well, the Nipigon is home to a unique species called the coaster brook trout, and they are found only in Lake Superior tributaries.
Okay.
For decades, these fish had their spawning beds totally blown out and flooded unpredictably, simply because the river channel was forced to carry water that historically belonged to an entirely different part of the continent.
Wow. So dams move the water around, they hold it back for power, or they dump it all at once.
Yeah.
But we need to transition to a totally different kind of threat now.
Right.
What happens when human industries physically remove the water from the watershed entirely? We are moving from redirecting the flow to completely draining it.
This brings us to the concept of consumptive withdrawals. And the prime example in the report is the South Saskatchewan River.
Which is listed as poor and declining.
Yes. In fact, it is considered Canada's most threatened river in terms of environmental flows.
I mean, it flows across the dry plains of Alberta and Saskatchewan, the Palliser Triangle, so it's already pushing through a pretty arid climate to begin with.
Exactly. And it is heavily exploited for agricultural irrigation. The physical removal of water in this basin is just staggering.
How much are we talking?
Water allocations total a massive 70% of the natural river flow.
70%. And it gets even more extreme on specific tributaries, right?
Yes, it does.
Because on the Bow River, up to 90% of the flow is diverted into irrigation canals.
It's almost all of it.
The report notes that below the Eastern Irrigation District Dam, it is actually possible to just walk right across the dry riverbed. Just picture that.
It's a surreal image.
A major Canadian river,
Yeah.
completely drained dry. You're just walking across rocks where millions of gallons of water should be rushing.
And this leads us to a really critical distinction in how human societies use water, which becomes incredibly clear when we look at the Athabasca River.
Right.
The Athabasca currently has a good status, but a declining forecast. The upper section in Jasper National Park is pristine.
Oh, it's beautiful there.
It's a UNESCO site, completely free-flowing, but the lower section feeds the world's largest energy project, the Athabasca Oil Sands.
Right, the oil sands. And the operators there are licensed to withdraw 441 million cubic meters of fresh water annually from the Athabasca.
It's a massive volume.
To put that massive number in perspective for you, that is more water than the entire city of Toronto uses in a whole year.
Yeah.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit. A giant city like Toronto uses hundreds of millions of cubic meters of water too.
Yeah.
So why is the oil sands withdrawal considered so much more dangerous for the river ecosystem?
That is the crucial question. And the answer really lies in the mechanics of how the water is actually used. There is a vast difference between just water use and consumptive use.
Okay, clarify that for me.
Sure. When a municipality like Toronto uses water, it goes through the city's plumbing, gets treated at a wastewater plant, and the vast majority of it is returned directly back into the Lake Ontario watershed.
So it's mostly a closed loop.
Exactly. It's a closed loop. But the Athabasca oil sands are highly consumptive. They return only 3.3% of the water they take.
Wait, 3.3%? Where on earth does the rest of it go?
It is permanently removed from the ecosystem because of the extraction process itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. To get the thick, tar-like bitumen out of the ground, operators have to boil that fresh river water into high-pressure steam and inject it deep underground to melt the oil.
Okay.
When that water comes back to the surface, it is mixed with heavy metals, clay, and, unrecoverable hydrocarbons. It becomes this highly toxic sludge that simply cannot be treated or returned to the river.
So it just sits there.
It goes into massive tailings ponds. So while a city merely borrows this water, this industrial process entirely consumes it.
That is terrifying.
And it gets worse. They are permitted to withdraw these massive volumes even during the winter low-flow periods.
Oh, no.
Yeah, which is when the fish are backed into deep pools and are at their absolute most vulnerable.
Right. So we've seen the damage from physical infrastructure like dams, and we've explored the mechanics of heavy industry literally boiling the rivers away. But even the rivers that are entirely untouched by these forces, like the truly wild rivers on our map, are facing a massive threat multiplier, something that alters the very source of their water before it even hits the channel.
Climate change.
Exactly. Climate change.
Climate change alters the entire context of water management. Even slight changes in temperature and precipitation result in drastic changes to the timing and magnitude of river flows.
It changes everything.
It really does. Let's look up north at the Mackenzie River. It is wild, free-flowing on its main stem, and it drains 20% of Canada's landmass into the Arctic Ocean.
Huge.
Its status is natural and steady, but the Arctic is warming faster than anywhere else on Earth.
And the Mackenzie Delta is one of the most productive ecosystems in the north, right? It feeds over 50,000 lateral lakes.
Yes.
But with warmer temperatures, the spring runoff is starting earlier. How does an earlier spring actually hurt a lake?
Well, it breaks the mechanical timing of the flood. Those 50,000 lakes rely on the spring flood overtopping the riverbanks to refill them.
Okay.
Historically, these massive ice jams would form in the river, acting like temporary dams that push the floodwaters out sideways into the delta lakes.
Oh, like natural blockages.
Exactly. If the Arctic warms and the snow melts earlier, the ice might not be thick enough to form those jams.
Yeah.
So the water just rushes straight out to the ocean, the lakes don't get replenished, and the entire migratory bird calendar is thrown completely out of sync.
That is such a delicate balance. And then we have the Fraser River out in British Columbia.
Yes.
Status good, forecast steady. It produces more salmon than any other river on Earth.
Okay.
But the report points out this terrifying thermal trend.
The temperatures.
Yeah. Lower snowpacks in the mountains and earlier spring melts mean that by late summer, the sheer volume of water in the river is dangerously low.
Right.
And because there is less thermal mass, that smaller volume of water heats up much faster under the summer sun. The water temperatures in the Fraser are routinely hitting 25 degrees Celsius.
And for salmon, 25 degrees is a lethal threshold.
Really?
Yeah, salmon are cold water species. They're highly sensitive to temperature. If the flow continues to decline and heat up, the Fraser salmon won't just struggle to spawn, they will literally die of heat stress trying to navigate their migration routes.
Just trying to swim home. It's a similarly grim story on the Skeena River, too. Also natural and steady right now. It sustains Canada's second largest wild salmon fishery, which brings in like $110 million annually.
It's a huge economic driver.
But it's facing lower summer flows due to a projected 56% decrease in snowpack by 2050, alongside looming industrial threats like coal bed methane extraction.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? How can we possibly protect these natural rivers when the very climate that dictates their flow is shifting?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it demands a fundamental shift in how we actually govern nature. River scientists have realized that the traditional assumption of stationarity is completely dead.
Wait, I'm lost. Stationarity meaning like the idea that historical weather patterns stay stable?
Yes, exactly.
But if we can't use historical data to figure out how much water a river's going to have next year, what are we supposed to base our conservation laws on? We can't just guess every year.
And that is exactly the crisis of modern hydrology. Stationarity assumes that you can look at the past 50 years of rainfall and snowmelt data, find the average, and then use that static number to grant water licenses for the next 50 years.
Which sounds logical in a stable climate.
Right. But in an era of climate change, that historical average is entirely obsolete. The baseline is shifting every single year.
Wow.
We are managing a moving target, which requires a shift toward highly dynamic adaptive management rather than just relying on an outdated snapshot of the past.
Okay, so knowing that historical data is obsolete and seeing how multiple pressures, hydropeaking, toxic withdrawals, disappearing snowpacks are all colliding, how do we actually course correct?
We have to change how we manage the systems.
Right, but what is the path forward? Are there any case studies in this report that offer some genuine hope?
There are, but to understand the solution, we first have to look at the bureaucratic roadblock that often gets in the way of saving a river.
Okay, let's hear it.
Take the Ottawa River. Its status is fair and declining. It has over 50 major dams. But the Ottawa is a boundary river. It physically forms the border between the provinces of Ontario and Quebec.
Oh, I see where this is going. So you have two totally different provincial governments with entirely different environmental regulations trying to manage pieces of the exact same water system.
Yes, and that fragmented governance is fatal to environmental flows.
I bet.
Each dam operator basically optimizes for their own local power grid within their specific province's rules. There is no comprehensive watershed-wide plan to integrate flow management.
It's just chaotic.
Exactly. Without managing the river as one cohesive ecosystem, it will continue to decline.
But it isn't all bad news, right? The report does highlight a couple of incredibly hopeful examples of recovery.
It does, thankfully.
First, the Grand River in southern Ontario. It flows right through heavily populated agricultural land. Decades ago, it was so polluted it was literally described as a sewer.
It was in bad shape.
But today, it's a Canadian Heritage River and an International Thies River Prize winner.
Quite the turnaround.
Yeah. And how did they do it? By creating community-led, low-water response teams. During dry periods, municipalities, farmers, and industries voluntarily coordinate to share the burden of conservation.
So everyone pitches in.
Exactly. Intentionally leaving enough water in the river to sustain the ecosystem.
And then there is the Nipigon River, which we discussed earlier with that massive Ogoki diversion.
That's right, the SimCity plumbing.
Exactly. In 1994, local citizens, indigenous communities, governments, and the hydropower company did something basically unprecedented.
What did they do?
They established a watershed management plan where the explicit goal was to change how the dams operated to actually mimic the river's natural flow regimes.
They intentionally recreated the heartbeat.
Yes. They stopped the extreme, chaotic water fluctuations.
And the ecosystem responded beautifully. The coaster, brook trout, and pike populations have seen a massive rebound.
It's an incredible success story.
Which leads me to a really obvious question, I think. If the Nipigon proved that simply changing how we operate our dam gates can literally bring species back from the brink, why aren't we legally requiring this everywhere?
This raises an important question, really, the ultimate question of political will. The WWF report lays out 3 massive, non-negotiable steps we must take to scale these local successes to a national level.
Okay, what's step 1?
Step 1, aggressive action on climate change. We must reduce emissions to slow the fundamental warming that is robbing our rivers of their source snowpacks.
Because, if the snow doesn't fall, it really doesn't matter how we manage the dam.
Precisely. You can't manage water that isn't there. Step 2, keeping water use within nature's limits. We need to legally establish what are called ecosystem-based flows.
Meaning a hard legal limit. Like a line in the sand where the government says, no matter how much the grid needs power or how much oil you want to extract, if the river drops below this specific flow rate, no one takes another drop.
That's the core of it, yes. A firm boundary.
And step 3.
Step 3, changing the flow. We need to physically retrofit how we operate our thousands of existing dams to balance human electricity needs with the natural seasonal rhythms the ecosystem requires.
So mimicking nature, like the Nipigon.
Right. But the ultimate solution that ties all 3 of these together is a concept called Integrated River Basin Management, or IRBM.
Integrated River Basin Management, meaning we manage the rivers by their natural watershed boundaries, not our arbitrary human political lines.
Yes.
We treat the whole system as one living organism rather than Ontario's half and Quebec's half.
Exactly. Nature's boundaries dictate where the water flows. Our governance absolutely must reflect that geographic reality, or we will just continue to lose these rivers piece by piece.
Well, we have covered so much ground across this map today. We've traveled from the artificially diverted waters of the Nipigon, through the drained, dusty beds of the South Saskatchewan, all the way up to the rapidly warming, out-of-sync deltas of the Mackenzie River in the Arctic.
It's quite the journey.
It is. And if there's one clear takeaway for you as you listen to this, it's that a country's total water volume means absolutely nothing without the natural rhythm of its flow. A static savings account of water is not a healthy, functioning river.
The flow is the heartbeat. Without that dynamic variability, the ecosystem collapses, regardless of how much blue is printed on the map.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, kind of building on that mind-bending concept of interbasin diversions we talked about earlier.
Oh, the Ogoki diversion?
Right. Think about the sheer scale of taking water that is supposed to flow into the Arctic Ocean and permanently forcing it down into the Great Lakes system. We aren't just altering how fast water moves. We are literally erasing the ancient natural borders of ecosystems.
It's profound when you think about it.
It really is. Because if water that belongs to the deep north is now carving its way out to the Atlantic Ocean just to power our cities, we really have to ask ourselves, at what point does a river stop being a natural force of geography and start becoming a human-made machine?
It's a profound question about our place in the natural world, really, and just how much control we actually have over it.
It is. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Until next time, keep questioning what you see on the map.
Thanks for listening.